Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you happen to be. This is Joe Papano from Fiberlink Communications, welcoming you to our 36th webinar in the More Webinar series. Today is actually a special one, and it's special because it's our first one that's actually focused on developing apps for mobile devices, specifically iPhones and iPads. So we're really thrilled to have Sumeet Singh, who's director of our iOS platform development team, presenting today on best practices for building iOS apps, and kind of is going to share with you some of what we've learned building apps here at MAS 360. So Sumeet, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Joe. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here.
Before we get started, I'm going to just kind of quickly go over kind of the general things that everyone typically asks. So we're going to, the slides are available, and they're up at our Master Center. You'll get an email right after the webinar with a link to the slides, and the recording will be put at the same place tomorrow. We're going to be running, like we usually do, a few polls during the webinar, so we'd love to hear what you're doing and share that with you. And of course, we've got about maybe 30-35 minutes of slides here, and then we'll get into Q&A. So we had a huge response to the webinar today, so it's actually been one of our most popular webinars ever, frankly, so I think that's great that folks find this topic so interesting. But obviously that means there's a broad level of kind of folks with technical knowledge here. So what we're going to do is, the slides are kind of, frankly, very kind of general and hopefully detailed enough for folks to learn from. But if you've got detailed questions, save them for the Q&A. You can send them in through the Q&A panel or the chat panel, and Sumeet will do his best to tackle each one. So those are the ground rules. Thanks for joining. Sumeet, I'm going to hand it over to you. What I'm going to do first, though, is start our first poll up, and it's really pretty simple. What we're asking is, what are you doing right now in terms of iOS app development? Sumeet, take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Joe. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So what are we learning today? Before we start developing application development on any platform, we typically want to look at various design choices that is at our disposal. So this is no different. We'll start with various types of apps that you can develop on iOS platform. We'll look at web apps, native apps, and hybrid apps. We'll go into details of web app and native app development. We'll then look at the nuances of developing native apps in an enterprise, few best practices there, followed by a few interesting features of iOS, starting with push notifications, location services, and data protection. So we'll look at some best practices there as well. I believe the poll has ended.
Yep, so I just, hopefully everyone's seeing the results right here. So, frankly, I'm a little bit surprised. 80% of the folks on the webinar either have developed apps already or plan to. Obviously, the majority plan to. And kind of frankly, a small minority, 22%, don't have any plans at this time. So that's interesting information. Thanks for sharing it with us.
All right, so let's get started. So before we start on this topic, I would like to stress that all these are development approaches, and regardless of whichever approach you decide to go by, you should always keep user experience as a paramount importance. If your app is not usable, nobody's going to use it. So just make sure that you select the technology with not just focusing on the technology itself, but really keeping users' experience in mind. So having said that, the first option for you to develop apps is developing a web app. Chances are that most of you have already been exposed to a web app. One of my favorite web app is ft.com, financialtimes.com. You can also check out Amazon's Cloud Reader. So web app, what is a web app? It's basically an app which is built using Web 3.0 technologies like HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript, and you can deliver very rich user experience using these technologies. So much so that you can even give a native app look and feel to it. You can have a web icon, a web clip icon on the home screen, just like a native app, which when you open would run in full screen mode, again just like a native app. And in the process list, you would see that specific icon just besides other native app icons. So it looks and feels pretty much like a native app. And thankfully, you have frameworks out there which give you access to the controls which are similar to the ones found in native app. You can make very good usable UIs using a web app. One other advantage is obviously cross-platform advantage, because this is all web technology. So if you have a device with a browser which supports HTML5, there you go. You can run the web app on the same, the same web app on different devices. Just one point of reference: if you are developing a web app for, say, iOS, you get, since that is based on WebKit, you get compatibility on RIM or BlackBerry 6.0, not 5.0 but 6.0, and Android as well. You just have to be a little careful though, because since HTML5 is an evolving standard, not all browsers support all the features available in HTML5. So just be a little careful out there. Installations are extremely easy. You just have to go to the website for the web app, and there you go. It's and you're using the web app. There's also a different point of view about installation. One is that you install a web app when you really add the web clip or the icon to the home screen, and start using it just like other native apps. So you could talk about installation in that fashion as well. One other thing I would like to mention about web app is that the discovery can be a problem. There's no entity like App Store where you can just go ahead and search for web apps just by typing their name or category. So there's nothing like that. So if so discovery of your apps could be one issue, if you want to target wider audience. So why the other thing is,
Sumeet?
Yeah.
Okay, could you tell folks what a web clip is?
Oh yeah, sure, no problem. Web clip is basically a shortcut to an app, to a URL. It basically has two things: the URL to the application, a web application, and an icon. There are a couple of ways of installing a web clip. One very straightforward way is you just, whichever site you are visiting, you just go to the action bar and press add to home screen, and there you go, you have a web clip out there. One other way of installing web clip is for devices which is being managed using MDM. There are MDM APIs which will help you install a web clip without user doing anything. Why would you use a web app? A typical recommendation is that if your app is heavy on content and you really don't care about access to hardware capabilities or like camera or accelerometer, and app discovery is, let's say, not your concern, you should strongly consider a web app approach, and you obviously get the added benefit of cross-platform compatibility. The next breed of applications is obviously native apps. Most of us, when we think about developing applications for iOS, we typically think about native apps. The one good thing is you get built-in marketing. If you're developing apps for App Store, your app is out there and it can be searched based on category or a description or name. Obviously, you get access to the different hardware capabilities. It's very useful for gaming applications or applications where you social networking applications where you can take photographs and share them. The other benefit is you can use push notifications to inform users when there is some update, even if the user is not using that application at that point in time. You can even change the badge numbers. We'll get to some details of push notification in further slides. The UI for native app is in general more snappy, more so if you have complex controls or even for gaming applications. And there's a reason for it because the native apps have while rendering their GUI, they use hardware acceleration, which is not available for web app because it's running in Safari. There's one caveat though, there's one good news though. With iOS 5, that limitation is going to go away. Safari will get hardware acceleration as well. So that's some good news for web app developers. You would need Objective-C expertise for developing native apps. Is there a question, Joe?
No, Sumeet, we're fine. I think you just cut out for a second there.
Okay. All right. So most of us, while thinking about choices, just stop at web apps and native apps, but that's not the case. There is a third breed of applications, and they're called hybrid apps. You can think of hybrid apps as a web app which is wrapped within a native app. And the concept here is that it's a native app with a browser control, which is rendering all the HTML5 JavaScript content wrapped within it. So all these HTML5 JavaScript CSS3 files are bundled as a resource within the native app. And the wonderful thing here is that there are libraries or frameworks out there which would give access to hardware capabilities to the JavaScript itself. So now you have a combination of both web app and native app living together. So why would you use a hybrid app? If you are a web developer, or if you have a team which has got web technology expertise, you'll have a very less learning curve while developing apps for iOS and host it on or post it on App Store. We did evaluate a few frameworks out there some time back, and we like two of them, which I would mention. The first one is Titanium Mobile. It's a commercial product, and the second one is PhoneGap, which is an open source option. It works with Sencha Touch. For folks who know web technology, they would probably have heard of Sencha libraries. So those are pretty cool. In fact, just to give you some example, NBC iPad app has been built is actually a hybrid app, and Logitech Squeezebox controller is a hybrid app. Again, this evaluation was done some time back, so please look at other frameworks as well with open mind.
Hey, Sumeet?
Yep.
The hybrid app is kind of interesting. You know this, but folks on the webinar may not know. We have a universal access client and a remote access wireless access service called M360, Mobility 360. That's basically a hybrid app, right?
Yep, exactly. Very good point, Joe.
It's a Windows application with a IE browser control in it, and you'd never know you're not in a native app.
Yep, good point. So let's take a deep dive into a web application. As I said earlier, a web app is built using Web 3.0 technologies, HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript. And you can get really good, rich UI experience or user experience with these. There are some really cool features with HTML5. The first one worth mentioning is persistence, and you have 3 options here. And doesn't mean that you can't use all 3 of them. First one is something called web storage. It's really an improvement over cookies, where you have a key value pair mechanism. The good thing here is it's local, and your application can access them locally and doesn't have to go through round trip.
Hey, Sumeet.
And yep.
It could. I'm still seeing slide 3. I think you're on to slide 4 now. There we go. Okay.
Thanks, Joe. There are 2 modes available for web storage. One is local mode, and the other is session mode. Again, depends on if local mode is applicable for a web app throughout for all the windows, and session mode is really for the window which is active. The next feature is really good. It has been a long-standing demand for from web developers. You now have a SQL database available at your disposal, which you can create on the device and store user-specific data, so that your data doesn't have to go back and forth with every request. So that's a very good feature, and it can be used for advanced persistent needs. The last feature in persistence is something called application cache, offline application cache. This helps you create web apps which can be accessed even while you're not online. Especially useful for games and e-readers. So the concept here is that you can save HTML5 files and JavaScript files on the device itself, which can then run even while you're not online. The other interesting feature is a touch event, where now you can have gestures and all that. Your web app can react to touch events. Geolocation is another interesting feature where you can get the access to users' location and present location-specific content. A user obviously has to accept or grant access, otherwise this feature won't work. So it does require users' permission. As I said earlier, HTML5 is an evolving standard, so please be careful about the choices that you make here. If you are concerned about cross-platform support, you should check on the availability of feature on various platforms, and do not program conditionals based on platform or versions. Always check for feature availability and handle code accordingly. There's a good reference for a platform feature matrix, which I think has been posted in the Masters Center.
Yeah, folks, all of the references that Sumeet's giving about frameworks and other resources, you're going to get an email right after this webinar that will have a link that will take you to an article where you can see the slides, and you'll also have links to all of the resources that Sumeet's talked about during the presentation. Right.
So I'll just mention a few web app frameworks real quick. Some of you may have already heard about it. JQ Touch is one very good lightweight plugin. It's about just about I think 4 KB. jQuery Mobile is another good library. It's about 20 KB. Gives you access to all the different controls, UI controls, and other interesting features. Sencha Touch is another very comprehensive library which you should check out. Coming to installation, as I said earlier, there are couple of viewpoints about installation. To use the true power of web app, I would say you should always have have the user create a web clip for the web app, like ft.com application does. You can have with that you can have an icon of your own app in the home screen, and you can run in full screen mode. You can have a splash screen, just like native apps. So we'll highly encourage folks to use a web clip. So that's about it for web app.
So we're going to open up our second poll now, and here what we're really interested in is who you're building apps for. So we know about 80% of you have built apps or plan to build apps. We'd be interested in knowing, who do you plan to build them for? So please reply back, and then we'll share the results with you in a minute. Go ahead, Sumeet.
Sure, thanks, Joe. All right, now let's look at native app development. There are a few things that you need to decide first. If you are developing an app for App Store, there's an Apple account that you have to get. It's called the iOS Developer Program. Goes for $99 per month, per year. And if you're developing apps for enterprise, there's a Developer Enterprise Program, which is $299 per year. You need a DUNS number, which is a Dun & Bradstreet number given to companies for being able to register with Developer Enterprise Program. As a side note, for companies who already have an MDM solution out there, chances are that you already have enrolled to a Developer Enterprise Program, because you need an APNS certificate to manage your devices, and which you get only after you enroll with Enterprise Program. So if you already have an MDM system, you are probably all set to develop enterprise apps. Before you start developing applications for App Store, I would highly recommend going through App Store review guidelines and iOS human interface guidelines. They'll tell you, what are the common problems or gotchas that folks do, and what are the best practices.
Hey, Sumeet, I thought you just got in the App Store. Isn't it that easy?
Yep. Yep, it is. All right. Once you open an account, you will have to go to a provisioning portal. This portal is used to set up all the artifacts that you need to be able to start development. These include developer certificates, hooking up all your developers with their own certificate, setting up test devices, creating an app ID for your application, and so on and so forth. So it can be slightly confusing in the beginning when you start working with provisioning portals. So I would recommend that you understand the basic constructs first and how they relate with each other. Like provisioning profile is really it kind of combines certificates with devices and app IDs. So once you get all those, it becomes very easy and straightforward. You would need a Mac and a knowledge of Objective-C. Xcode is the ID. It's a one-stop shop for all your development needs, really. You would need to install the latest version of iOS SDK. You should, you can download, there are a lot of examples, Hello World kind of examples out there with the documentation itself, and you should be up and running in no time. You should just be careful about the target device that you are setting and the minimum OS version that you want to support. Let's say 4.0 or whatever 3.x versions. And there's plenty of documentation out there in Apple's developer website, which will get you up and running in no time. So now that you have developed, an application and you are ready to kind of give it out for testing, you should be aware of different kinds of builds. There are three kinds of builds really. The first one is a developer build, which is really meant for developers. They install it on the devices they test on. The second kind of build is called ad hoc builds. These are builds which is meant for the testers, and to make these builds you have to add the test devices, the UDIDs of the devices onto the provisioning portal, and there's a limit of 100 test devices per developer account. So if you have, let's say, outsourced your development, or if you're getting ad hoc builds, if you're getting testing builds, chances are that those builds are really ad hoc builds. And the third kind of build is what is called a distribution build. These builds are made when your app is ready for production deployment. Which in case of App Store means that you're ready to submit it to App Store, or in case of enterprise, it means that it's really ready for enterprise-wide deployment. Coming to testing applications or testing strategies, there are two things that I would like to mention. The first one is device selection. So based on what kind of devices you are targeting, I would recommend that you get those devices. If it is iPhone or iPad or Retina display, etc. So you should make sure that you get the right device and test it on the devices itself, and not just the simulators, because the performance characteristics of device is actually different than a simulator. In terms of process, I would recommend that you should have automated tests. It's very easy to create automated tests, which I'll come to in the next section or the next point. So you can run these automated tests quickly, do a smoke test or just a sanity check before you send out builds to a wider testing group. If you have a need to test your applications on different networks or different locations, you can try a company called Device Anywhere. They have various kinds of mobile devices deployed in different countries and different networks. I think primarily in US and UK. So if you want network-specific testing, you can definitely look at them. Profiling is one of the core development practice. So for profiling, there's an application called Instruments, which is part of Xcode, and it's really it gives you a very comprehensive list of tools to be able to profile or get application performance characteristics, be it memory usage or network usage, CPU, etc. And you can profile either on a simulator again or on a device, but my recommendation would be doing it on a device, because CPU and memory throughput, etc. on simulator is a lot different than a device. And especially if your application is resource intensive, you should definitely try it on device.
Yeah, and of course everyone who's carrying these things around today is kind of aware of the power drain and battery situation, so that's kind of something software folks would typically not pay attention to.
Yep, good point, Joe. Yep. And a good thing is Instruments also has this a component which will help you write automated UI test cases. So I'll highly recommend people using this and it's very simple to create automated UI test cases. So you should do that for a quick round of testing on different devices, just to make sure you didn't break anything. The last one is internationalization. It's a good practice to design your app with internationalization in mind from the beginning, and not react to it if the need comes later. All you have to do is group your resources in a particular language, and to start with, if you intend to support only English, we should have all this grouping done based on the English locale, so that when a need arises later, you don't have to go through code refactoring and all that. It's really ready for localization later on. So you should pay attention to that as well from the beginning. Okay. So now we have talked about how you develop native app. We'll go and look at some of the best practices for developing native apps in enterprises.
So this is kind of above and beyond maybe what you might do for a game or some other type of app that's kind of personally kind of focused, correct?
Yep.
And so quickly, folks, I'm sure you've all seen the poll results by now. So most folks, no surprise, are building apps for their customers and their employees or the general public. Frankly, I'm a little bit surprised that employees came out ahead of customers, but that's probably kind of accurately reflects, given the number of responses, what people are thinking and doing right now. Go ahead, Sumeet.
Yeah, sure. When you develop applications for enterprise, one aspect that you have to be really careful about is security. Security is a big concern for enterprises, and chances are that your company has a security team who would audit your app before it is deployed to a wider audience. So one of the first best practice, it's even recommended by Apple, is to have user authentication in your enterprise app. So it's easy, if you want to disallow access of an employee. Let's say the employee has left the company, by just turning off the account and not worrying about uninstalling the application. One other best practice in this regard is always to save the user credentials in keychain. It's a common mistake that people do by saving the credentials in the NS defaults or the default plist file for the application. So you should never do that. You should always use keychain. Again, a best practice to save all this sensitive information. But you shouldn't go overboard and save bulk data in keychain. It's really meant for accounts or some encryption key and things like that, which an application wants to save for later use. The second one is very basic. I think pretty much everybody these days uses HTTPS, but just there for making sure you are using HTTPS. Installation is a big headache for enterprises when you have, and this is no surprise, because app management, even in laptops, has been a big concern and takes a lot of time. So it's no different in a device in mobile world. So I'll just go through some basics of how an enterprise app can be deployed, and we'll give you some options. So the way you would deploy an enterprise app is your app is really, when it's ready for deployment, it's an archive. It's a .ipa file. You would host that file on a web server. You would host an icon for the file on the web server, and then you would create something called a manifest file. It's really a plist, which is in an XML format, which contains details about the URL of the IPA file and the icon, and some details about the bundle ID of the application and the version. And you create a link for the location of the manifest file and send it out to users. And when the users click on that link, I mean, basically they get it probably by email or SMS or something like that, and they open Safari, and when they open the link, the control goes to a service called ITMS service. It's the iOS installer service, and that service reads the manifest file, gets the location of the IPA file, downloads it, and while downloading, it shows an icon, which is the icon that you gave reference to in the manifest file, and completes the installation. So that's the basic of how the installation works. Now you have a few choices here. You can develop your own app catalog if you want, or you can look at some enterprise-ready app catalog solutions out there. A lot of MDM vendors these days do provide app catalogs, so you should consider that.
And this is where I have to jump in, Sumeet, and say, and NAS 360 is one of the platforms that does provide a corporate app store capability. So, because a couple questions came in while you were kind of on this slide asking, how do you get an enterprise app out to the endpoints? And the answer is you would not do that through Apple's public app store. You do that through a private app store. And there are companies out there that provide just an app store capability. And then there's MDM vendors like us with our MAS 360 platform. And one of the features we provide is an app store that companies can use to push these apps out to their employees' mobile devices. Hey, Sumeet?
Yep.
One other question. I know that, we're pretty heavy into the final round of our iOS 5 development right now. I know iOS 5 has some features around app management that are significantly better than previous versions of iOS.
Yeah, good point, Joe. Yeah, I'll elaborate on that. With iOS 5, one of the many improvements is in the app management feature, and this is in the area of MDM APIs. So now, for mobile devices which are being managed via MDM, you can push applications, and these applications can be both App Store applications and enterprise applications to the devices without the user initiating the installation. So it's really like a remote installation, but user would get a prompt to accept the installation, but it's really much more streamlined now. And one good thing that is coming in is that the applications which are installed using MDM APIs can also be uninstalled. So IT admins have complete control of those applications.
All right, so that's a huge difference, and I think kind of a real proof point of how Apple's kind of taking iOS in a direction that makes it kind of more manageable for enterprises, right? Because in the consumer space that frankly the iPhone came from, the user did everything, and everything centered around the user, installing apps, uninstalling apps, and here in iOS 5 that model is going to change a little bit. So I think that's an interesting development.
Yep, exactly. If your company is developing multiple applications, you should look at some SDKs and toolkits. It is desirable to have to be able to use the common services and components across applications, especially user authentication, auditing, how many times the application was used, etc. Usage statistics. So there are toolkits out there, again provided by many MDM vendors as well, and third-party providers. So you should consider those.
So we're going to open up our third poll right now, and so Sumeet kind of introduced this concept of native app, web app, hybrid app. For the folks that are building apps or are planning to build them, we'd be interested in knowing what types of apps you plan to build, and you'll see why in a minute. Go ahead, Sumeet.
Sure. So now let's talk about a few interesting features of iOS. The first one is push notification. Chances are that you have already been exposed to push notification. It's basically the idea here is that your application backend server can let a user know or send a message to the user if there is an interesting update for the user, and those notifications can be in the form of a badge, which is the first image here, the one in the top right corner with 1. That's called a badge. So this is useful for, let's say, mail applications or chat applications where you want to show the outstanding updates or unread mails or chats. The second kind of notification is an alert, which is, let's say, your friend trying to reach out to you and you are not on the chat site, so you could get a message or an alert with 2 action buttons. That's a default behavior. And a third kind of notification is a sound notification. It is, and you can have one single notification which has all 3 types, sound, alerts, and batch. Okay. That's the concept of a push notification. Now, how do you enable your app for using push notification? So the way you do it is you have to go to the provisioning portal, and you create and you enable, first of all, enable the app for APNS, which is short form for Apple Push Notification Service. You get an APNS certificate and download the certificate, and subsequently you use that certificate for sending notifications to your devices. And I'll also explain you a little bit about how this whole APNS link is tied. At this point, you have your app servers, which is ready with the APNS certificate to be able to send notifications to the devices. Now, when you install an APNS-enabled application on a device, the first thing that it does is, it asks for an APNS token, something called an APNS token, which is specific to that device and that application. And when this is done, a user would get a prompt that this application wants to use, push notification, and a user has to, say yes or no. If the user accepts that, the OS would then reach out to its to Apple's push notification server and generate a device-specific token and give that token back to the device. Now it's up to the app to send that device that device token to the app server, where the app server would then keep that token besides that device identifier. And now in future, all the bootstrapping is now done with respect to the app server being able to send a notification to the device. Now in future, if the app server wants to send a notification, all it has to do is just get the APNS certificate, get the device token, and construct the notification, and there are APIs to do that. And there you go. The notification is sent to the APNS service. It's really the Apple Cloud, from where it then reaches the OS, and then the OS hands over or funnels that notification to the client. All right. Now you would see I have a diagram here which depicts how the flow is. The flow from the device to the client app is is not in bold. I mean, one reason for that is this link is really tied to a user. If it is of alerts, it's tied to the user accepting or clicking on view to open up the application. If the user clicks on close, the notification is not going to reach the app. One other advanced usage of APNS notification is you can also bundle certain app-specific data within the notification. It probably could be some context or something which is not required to be shown to the user, but your application needs it. So that's one other usage of push notification. Now you have, in terms of app server, you have a couple of choices. You can either build your own server, It's not that difficult to build your own server. There are libraries out there which will help you. There are like Java libraries out there which will help you, send APNS notifications. The other choice is you can outsource it. There are companies which can, enable APNS notifications for an app, with various price points, per notification. So that's the other option. Right. Let's move on to the last point about push notifications. Sometimes it can be a daunting task to get notifications work, and there are a few gotchas here. So first thing that you have to be careful about is firewall rules. You have to know the ports that are required to be open from the server network. It's port 2195 and 2196, and you need to be able to access the Apple's IP address block. On the device side, you again have to be careful that if it is connected to Wi-Fi, the port 5223 is open. So two things to look out for. Sometimes you would find that the APNS certificate is expired, and hence your notifications are not working. The certificates are really valid for 1 year, so you have to be really careful about renewing it at the end of the year. If you still have problems, getting notifications, there's also a file out there. It's called apnslogging.mobileconfig. If you just search for this file name, you would get a link to this file. You can install this mobile config or configuration file, and you would start seeing various APNS logging, and you can understand what's going on there. The last one is the case of missing notifications. So you should make sure that your notifications are not stateful. If you send multiple notifications and those notifications don't reach out to the device yet, only the last notification is saved, so and delivered to the device. So Apple does not queue notification; it just overwrites with the latest one, which has not been sent out. So you should be careful about that as well. Okay. So that's all about push notification. Let's move on to other interesting feature called location service. Hey Joe, I think the poll has ended.
Yeah. We hopefully everyone's seen the results from that poll. I mean, I think it's kind of no surprise. Most folks would build a cross-platform app versus native app, I think, which makes sense. So I think Sumeet, in the interest of time, we're going to skip the last poll, and I'll just let you roll through the rest of your slides, and we'll finish up with whatever Q&A we can fit in. Okay?
Sure. So location service, there are varied usage of this. The use ranges from social networking to navigation services to giving location-specific content. While this feature is very interesting, it can be very risky as well if you don't use it carefully. This is a huge battery drain, so you should evaluate various options at your hand and then select the one which has the least impact on battery. So the first one is called standard service, standard location service. It uses all three modes of detection: GPS, Wi-Fi, and cellular radio. It is configurable, which means you can put in distance filter and accuracy filter. Just make sure that you don't use a very high accuracy filter, which is the default, which could mean that the OS would try to use GPS. So just try to be as coarse as possible. The second option is called significant change service. This was introduced in iOS 4. Especially meant for applications who really don't care about fine or granular control of location service. They are fine with getting periodic updates. So those applications should use significant change. It's because it's really low on power. The other interesting feature about significant change is that it has the capability of waking up your app. So if your app wants to use location service and has a need to send data periodically, this is your API. This is what you should use. You in the callback, you typically get only 10 seconds to run, but you can always have a background task which where you could do a lot of other work and finish your task. The third one is again very interesting. It's called region monitoring. This is what you typically use for geofencing like solutions, where you want to react to the device coming in and going out of a region. And the way you define region is by giving the center coordinate and a radius. So those are the three options. Best practice is always be as coarse as possible because it can be a huge battery drain. The last topic is data protection. This is these APIs were introduced in iOS 4, where the user's passcode was tied to the encryption mechanism. Now, encryption mechanisms were introduced in 3GS, but in iOS 4, because of these data protection APIs, you could have a situation where you can save files which are accessible only when the device is unlocked, which was again huge. So what this means is that if the device is stolen, your critical information which is saved using the data protection APIs would not be stolen. Right? So you should, by default, use these APIs. The only place where you would probably not use these APIs is when, or you should be a little careful about, is when your application runs in the background as well. Because if chances are if the application is running in the background and the phone is locked, you won't be able to access your files. So there's a file system API for data protection, and there's a keychain API. So you should use both appropriately. And the recommendation is that all apps should use these, and then you should treat it as more of an exception as to why you shouldn't use it. Right? So with that, we have looked at various app development options and various best practices and guidelines for using different services of iOS.
Thanks, Sumeet. Could you just head to the next slide for me?
Sure.
Well, folks, this is the commercial, and I'm going to be brief because I'm sure you're all here to really ask questions of Sumeet. So obviously, FiberLink makes the MAS 360 mobile device management platform. That's why Sumeet knows all this great stuff about building iOS apps and is able to come here and share it today. We think we got the best platform on the market. The great news is you can go to our website, mas360.com, and try it yourself. It takes about 15 minutes to get going, and we're obviously going to encourage you to go do that. Sumeet, could you just jump to the next slide? End of commercial. Our next webinar is on September 29th in 2 weeks, putting employee-owned iPhones and iPads to work. So it's going to be more kind of business-focused around best practices for how companies can put a program in place that will allow employee-owned devices to be used safely in a corporate environment. So it's kind of really how to implement a bring-your-own-device type of program for companies. So it's obviously one of the key use cases that companies come to us for, right? So typically they're trying to figure out how to enable these personally owned devices, or they've already enabled them, and now they're recognizing the need to manage and secure them. And that's obviously one of the key business use cases for why companies look for MDM solutions. So we'll be talking about that in 2 weeks. Lots of questions have already come in around information that Sumeet was presenting during the webinar. In a few minutes, you'll be getting an email that will have a link to a post where you can find the slides from today's webinar, and also a lot of links to the resources that Sumeet mentioned during the webinar. And if we're not able to get to your question, because we've got a ton of them here, you can sign up at the Master Center, and you can post your question there on that particular post that we've got for this webinar, and Sumeet will be happy to reply back to you on those questions. So thanks for that. Sumeet, we got a couple minutes here, so I'm going to kind of roll through here and find a couple that I think that will be of interest to folks. So the first question is, do I have to develop on a Mac if I'm building iOS applications?
I think I recently read that you can also develop applications for iOS on Windows, but I don't have a link for that. I'll try to find that and send it to you. But a larger population does use Mac, and I would advise using a Mac if you can.
Okay, so you do your development on a Mac, I'm assuming.
Yep, I do. Everybody in our team does development on Mac.
Okay. Another question here that's about app deployment is, can you, instead of using an app store, can you get an app to a handset by emailing the installation file?
I don't think so. You can probably, you can. What you will have to do is you need to make sure that if it's an, again, depends on the kind of file. So if it is an application meant for App Store, it has to be an ad hoc build. If it is an enterprise application, then again it has to be either an ad hoc build or a distribution build. What you would have to do is, first of all, save that onto the disk and then sync that application using iTunes or IPCU, which is the iPhone configuration utility.
Okay, so
you can't just you can't just do it on the phone.
Right. So it's not something that it's not a mechanism an enterprise could really rely on for getting
No, definitely not.
It
may work for testing, but it's not really meant for production deployment.
Yeah, end users aren't going to be able to figure that out.
Yep. Your support calls will increase.
Yeah, without a doubt. There's a question, and maybe Sumeet, because this got asked a lot during the presentation, if you could just talk about a couple of the cross-platform frameworks that you mentioned earlier in the webinar.
Yeah, sure. The first one was Titanium Mobile. You have to pay for that. It's a commercial product. And the second one is PhoneGap. That's an open source solution. Okay,
so another question did come in about PhoneGap. So is that one that you're familiar with?
Not much, but yeah, I can take the question.
Okay, so yeah, the question was just, if you'd had any experience with PhoneGap or another cross-platform toolkit.
It was just limited to writing a hello world example. Somebody in our team helped us out with that. So if you need any specifics, I can probably get you in touch with the person.
I'm going to give a shout out here to Abraham Rajan. So he replied back on the earlier question about developing an iOS app on a non-Mac device, and the answer is, if you want to do it on a PC, you can, but you have to pay a wrapper license to Apple in order to do that. So there's no way to develop on a non-Mac machine without paying for that wrapper license. So thanks for providing that information. It's obviously not something we do, so we're all using Macs. And kind of scrolling back up through. So here's a question, Sumeet. I don't know if you'll know the answer, but I'll throw it out. How do you perform penetration testing on the iOS apps, whether web, native, or hybrid? That may be
That's an interesting one. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think I'll have to think about that a bit. Yeah, probably I'll take this offline, Joe.
Okay. All right, so folks, we got a ton of questions here that we didn't get to. I appreciate everybody's engagement here. Like I said, we'll try to get back to you on all these if possible. If you post your question to the post for this webinar. You'll be getting the link in a few minutes. We'll pass all that on to you. Thanks again for your time. See you in 2 weeks. Hope you can make it to our next webinar. Thanks for all your engagement today. Sumeet, thanks for all your hard work putting this information together and presenting it for us.
No problem. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.